I once messed up the life of a woman who used to be my stepdaughter. Well, it's more like it was almost her own fault. But since my revelation led to the collapse of the happy marriage she had envisioned, I guess it's not wrong to say I was the one who broke it. This former stepdaughter, Cassie, was the child of my first husband, Frederick, and his ex-wife, so essentially my stepchild. When Frederick told me about Cassie, I was honestly worried about being accepted, but we hit it off pretty quickly, having meals together and going out. As we continued our relationship, Cassie started saying how nice it would be if Evelyn, me, was her mom, and that made me really happy. I even started thinking that if things kept going well, we might be able to get married. But when the talk of marriage got serious, things didn't go as smoothly as one might think, especially since my parents weren't too thrilled. I guess you can imagine why. It was my first marriage, and Frederick had been divorced before and already had a child. There was always this worry about suddenly becoming a parent to someone who wasn't biologically related. Of course, I had my own worries and anxieties, but then Frederick said, "We might have conflicts when Cassie enters her teenage years, but I promise to intervene and resolve things. I know there might be inconveniences and worries, but I'll work hard to build our family. Will you support us?" He pleaded with my parents like that, and finally, we got permission to marry. We registered our marriage around the time Cassie started middle school, but about 6 months after our marriage, Cassie's rebellious phase began. Ignoring me or rolling her eyes was just the start. She even refused to eat the meals I made. When I tried to tell her it's unhealthy not to eat during her growth period, she'd snap back. "I don't want orders from a stranger like you." Sometimes I deliberately left her alone, but she didn't like that either, accusing me of ignoring her because we weren't blood related. "What am I supposed to do then?" I'd ask, and she'd just say, "Figure it out yourself." Dismissively. It was enough to break my heart, even though I was prepared for it. But when I talked to Frederick about Cassie, all he said was, "It's a difficult time. It can't be helped." Or, "She's also suffering." He wouldn't even attempt to have a direct conversation with her. Fed up, I told him, "Please, we need to work on this together." His response? "Well, the fact is you're not blood related. Maybe she senses your hesitation. Be more confident and motherly, and she'll understand. Also, I'm tired. Don't bring every little issue between you two to me." I was dumbfounded by his indifferent attitude and words, and couldn't say anything after that. Though I'm not her biological mother, Frederick is her biological parent. But since I chose this marriage despite my parents' obligation, I couldn't just step down as a mother because she was rebellious and I was tired. I'm still her mother in a way, even if not by blood. So I decided to keep trying, believing that she would eventually understand. But even after 1 year, then 2, Cassie's attitude didn't change. It worsened. Not only did she continue to be rude to me, but she also started portraying me as the villain. For instance, when I asked her to throw away candy wrappers she'd left lying around all day, she told Frederick I had yelled at her for not doing it immediately. Believing her, Frederick would scold me, saying it was cruel to yell over something so trivial. There were other instances too, like when she'd leave the toilet paper roll empty and I'd ask her to refill it for the next person. She'd complain to Frederick that I'd belittled her for a simple mistake, again, making me out to be the bad guy. And these are just a few examples. There were many more, like being forced to redo the dishes because a bit of grease was left, or being ordered to clean up while suffering from menstrual pain. Just to clarify, that day she unusually offered to do the dishes, so I let her. But she just rinsed them with water without using detergent. I only reminded her that you need detergent and a sponge to get the dishes clean. The reason I told her to clean up was because she left a used sanitary napkin out in the open. I just wanted her to throw it away, thinking it would be bad if it became a habit. I explained these details to Frederick, saying Cassie's claims were wrong, but my words fell on deaf ears. Frederick totally believed Cassie. Meanwhile, Cassie stood behind him with a mocking smile. Not satisfied with just that, Cassie started crying to the parent-in-law, leading me to get scolded by them every 3 days.
"Why are you being mean to our precious granddaughter?"
They'd ask. At first, I kept denying it, saying it wasn't true. But parents-in-law and Frederick believed everything Cassie said, so they never listened. It felt like they just wanted to lecture me. As a result of such stressful days, I finally became so lethargic that I couldn't get out of bed, go to work, or even barely make it to the bathroom. But instead of showing concern, Cassie and the others seemed annoyed, telling me to hurry up and do the piled-up housework, calling me useless for not being able to work properly. Eventually, when I was bedridden and couldn't move, Cassie even came to me saying I was just pretending to get attention. I had no energy to respond, so I just sat there in silence. But even that seemed to annoy them. They started making loud noises on purpose as if to attack me. But Cassie is cunning. She never did any of this in front of Frederick. Moreover, she'd claimed to have been taking care of me while Frederick was at work. So, he'd scold me, saying I was treating such a kind child terribly, pushing me to my breaking point. I have no idea why I'm so disliked from all sides, but whatever. It doesn't matter anyway. No one would miss me if I were gone. With these thoughts, the room I was looking at suddenly disappeared from my sight. And next thing I knew, I was standing on the rooftop of an unfamiliar building, still in my room clothes. I don't remember how or when I moved or how I got there. It was as if I had teleported, the scenery changing so abruptly. But well, it's fine. Just as I thought the height was enough and began to take a step forward, my mobile phone in my pocket suddenly started ringing. Startled, I stopped and pulled out the phone to see Mom on the caller ID. At that moment, tears I hadn't shed before started to flow like a waterfall. But I didn't want her to realize I was crying, so I answered the phone calmly. Then, "I just wanted to hear your voice after so long, Eveline. You haven't shown your face around here at all. Come visit us sometime. How have you been? Are you eating properly? I can bring you some food if you like." Hearing Mom's bright and caring voice, I couldn't hold back anymore and burst into tears on the rooftop of that unknown building, shouting, "Mom!" into the phone. Mom on the other end panicked, asking, "What? What's wrong?" But I was crying so hard, I started hyperventilating and couldn't speak properly. Then, Dad must have taken the phone from Mom, as he was now on the line, telling me to calm down and asking where I was. I managed to say I was on the rooftop of a large building, not sure where. He instructed me to stay put and keep the line open, and asked for any sign or billboard that could help them locate me. Hearing that, I just cried even more, apologizing for causing trouble. But Dad didn't blame me. Instead, he comforted me, saying not to cry so much. Gradually, I calmed down and made my way downstairs on my own. gripping the stair railing and slowly descending. I had a lot of thoughts during that descent. Like, Cassie's behavior is just harassment under the guise of being a teenager or going through a rebellious phase, or that the people around me who only blame me are just as guilty. And about how Frederick, who promised to handle everything when we got married, was now acting like it's none of his business, completely useless. As these thoughts filled my mind, anger started to bubble up. Despite feeling so hopeless before, I decided I wouldn't let them have their way anymore. Before I knew it, I had reached the bottom of the building. Looking around, I realized I was near my workplace. I wondered if I even had a place there anymore, considering I had been absent for so long, thinking maybe I should quit. As I was pondering this, my boss happened to pass by and, surprised, asked me what was going on. I could have made excuses, but standing there in my pajamas was strange enough, so I just honestly explained my situation. My boss then told me to wait in the office until my parents arrived. Remembering that the phone was still connected, I told my boss, who then took my mobile phone and informed my parents of the company's address and that they were taking care of me. When I spoke about everything that had happened in the office,
My understanding is clear now. You've really done well up to now. I don't think it's right to criticize other families, but honestly, your daughter, husband, and parents are strange. They seem to be looking down on you, using you as a punching bag. You should leave them immediately, or you'll end up in a situation like today again,
my boss said with a serious expression. The other office staff nodded in agreement, saying they'd help if there was anything they could do for me. But when I said I couldn't burden them further since I'd already been off for a month, my boss raised his voice in protest.
You couldn't possibly work under such tough circumstances. Everyone here, including myself, was worried about you because you're always so diligent. There wasn't a single person who complained about being inconvenienced by your absence. You're that well respected, so have confidence. It's going to be okay,
my boss said. Hearing this, I was so relieved that I burst into tears. Later, my parents came to pick me up, and after thanking my boss and the staff, I went back to my parents' house for safety. I did inform Frederick that I was going back to my parents' house, but all I got was an acknowledgement and nothing more. That night, Mom started a conversation asking what had happened. I began to tell her everything I'd endured from Cassie and the others. I broke down in tears midway, unable to speak properly, but my parents patiently listened without rushing me until I had finished talking, which took a little over an hour. After I had finished, my dad, who had been silent, said,
We, as parents, understand the feeling of wanting to protect one's child. But what's he doing is just spoiling her, pushing all the trouble onto Eveline. A parent must face their child, even if it means being disliked. Eveline has done enough. You don't have to endure anymore. We can't forgive those who pushed our precious daughter to this extent.
Hearing this, I realized anew that I was a cherished daughter to my parents, and decided I didn't want to cause them any more sorrow, so I resolved to divorce. I requested a divorce through a lawyer, but Frederick didn't immediately agree, not understanding why I wanted to divorce. He seemed shocked, as if he had no idea what had happened, which surprised me even more. Eventually, the case went to mediation because Frederick kept refusing. I claimed I had been subjected to moral harassment by Frederick's family, but he outright denied it. He argued that Cassie's behavior was just a phase of teenage rebellion, and that it was actually me who was being mean to Cassie, his stepchild. However, my claim of being driven to the rooftop was recognized, and my boss, who had taken care of me at the time, helped by testifying. Frederick's arguments were dismissed. The court found Frederick at fault for not addressing the issues despite being aware of them, and I was relieved that my claims were largely accepted. After some time, I received a small amount of compensation and the divorce was finalized. When I went to the house to collect my belongings, Cassie was there, glaring at me. Ignoring her, I calmly packed my things, even as she stood behind me ranting about how pathetic I was for living alone and how sorry she felt for her dad for marrying someone like me. I ignored all that too. When I reacted nonchalantly to her kicking my suitcase, she turned red with anger. As I was finishing up and about to leave, she said, "I heard from Dad. You're slick and can't have kids, right? That means you're finished as a woman, right? So pathetic. Well, I'll tell you why Dad married you. It's because you can't have kids and you work hard to make money. Really, you're pitiful," she said, laughing vulgarly. Thinking to myself how utterly lost she was as a person. Well, from your perspective, I might be finished as a woman, but honestly, I'm thankful now that I can't have children. After all, having a child like you or someone like your useless father wouldn't be pleasant. But I feel sorry for you. You have such an incompetent man as a father. That's why you couldn't get proper education and ended up so useless, right? I told her, and her face turned even redder, and she trembled with anger. Seeing her face, I didn't care anymore and just left the house. Thus, we parted ways, and 3 years passed without any contact. I was content with remaining single, but then a friend introduced me to a man who would later become my husband, Bobby. Bobby also couldn't have children, which led to his divorce from his previous wife, and he had remained single since. Our similar situations brought us closer, and we eventually started dating. One day, while tipsy, I accidentally mentioned my previous marriage. He sympathetically said how hard it must have been and started crying. His tears made me cry too. Time with kind-hearted Bobby was so comforting that it gradually melted my resolve against marriage, and we got married in our 2nd year of dating. I worried his attitude might change after marriage, but even after 3 and 5 years, Bobby remained as kind as ever. However, this peaceful life was suddenly disrupted. One day, I received a call from an unknown number, which I normally wouldn't answer, but for some reason, I did this time. The familiar voice on the other end was, "Yes, Mom?" It was Cassie. Hearing her voice made me feel sick, but I managed to ask how she got my number. She said she found it in Frederick's notebook. She wanted me to write a letter as the bride's mother for her wedding. I was about to refuse, but then a dark thought crossed my mind, and I agreed to meet her at a cafe near the station the following week. On the day, I secretly carried a voice recorder and asked her about her fiancé. I learned he was from a traditional family and many important guests from his and his family's business connections would attend the wedding. So, I asked why she wanted me and not her biological mother to write the letter. She said her grandpa forbade her from meeting her real mom. Curious, I asked for more details. Dad said Mom was stupid and it was okay to be mean to her. When I did, something happened and she got mentally ill. Grandpa and the others took her away and that was it. So I can't meet her, even if I want to. It's impossible right from the start. She replied nonchalantly, shocking me with her attitude towards her own mother. After hearing some of her story, I asked why she harassed me back then. Nothing special, just a way to kill time or relieve stress. Nothing more. I just didn't like the idea of a stepmother. But those times were the best, you know? Dad, grandpa, grandma, everyone believed everything I said and focused all their attacks on you. It was hilarious. Your face when Dad was scolding you was so ugly. Oh, and I heard later that you tried to jump. Why didn't you just do it? Would have been easier for you. She said this with such a gleeful expression that I calmly realized how far gone she was. But, well, I got the evidence I needed. More than enough, really. I was amazed at her audacity to say such things to someone she's asking to write a letter for her as the bride's mother. I agreed to read the letter, saying I'd definitely do it, and she was delighted, saying, "That's great, Mom, thank you." But I told her I'd only attend to read the bride's mother's letter, and that she would make excuses for the rest, which she easily agreed to. On the day, I didn't join the bride's family's table, waiting at the back until announced for the letter. As soon as I appeared, there was a hush and whispering around. Whether it was because I suddenly appeared as the bride's mother, or because of my mourning attire, I'm not sure. I didn't mind and started reading the prepared letter. "Hello, everyone. I was called here today as the bride's mother, but Cassie and I have no blood relations. We are virtually strangers. I was married to Cassie's father for a few years, but divorced. The reason was Cassie and her father, a case of grand moral harassment by them and their parents." As I read this, the murmurs in the room grew louder. I saw Cassie visibly disturbed in her seat. But I continued without care. I exposed all the verbal abuse from Cassie, Frederick's negligence. The way my former in-laws completely disregarded my side of the story and continued to berate me based on Cassie's words. I spoke of being driven to the brink of taking my own life, and how these claims were recognized in court, leading to our divorce. Then, I played the recording from the cafe, loud enough for the entire hall to hear, including Cassie's wish that I had fallen. The recording's harsh content left the hall in dead silence. I didn't come here today to celebrate. It's a payback. However, I apologize for involving all of you in my personal affairs. And to the groom, you might want to reconsider marrying this woman. After I said this, the groom, as if coming to his senses, was furiously confronting Cassie about her terrible words. Cassie was panicking and kept denying everything, but the groom's relatives started blaming her and Frederick, which looked quite comical as they scrambled in confusion. Of course, the venue descended into chaos after that, but I thought I had no further part in it and gracefully made my exit. Cassie was too caught up in the mess to follow me. Sometime later, Frederick contacted me, furiously asking what I was going to do about it. I told him I hadn't lied about anything, and that it was their own fault. Apparently, the Frederick family faced a backlash from the groom's relatives after my revelation. Several important business partners of the groom's family were among the guests and started threatening to not renew contracts because of Frederick's disgraceful wife. The groom's family, in panic, tried to sever ties with Cassie and her family, but couldn't immediately due to Cassie being pregnant with the groom's child. However, they were under attack from all sides, with no one left to support them. After hearing everything, when Frederick said I should feel sorry for Cassie, I just replied, "Not at all," and hung up, blocking his number. Later, Cassie contacted me, blaming me for being ostracized by her husband's family and threatening to sue. I told her she was welcome to try, and added, "Maybe there really is a God. Everything you did to me is coming back to haunt you. That's what you call karma, you know. If things continue like this, your unborn child might treat you the way you treated me and your biological mother, who went through pain to give birth to you." When she started shouting incoherently, I quietly ended the call. After changing my phone number, I haven't had any contact with Cassie or the Fredericks since. I don't know what's become of them, but I'm sure they're not living well. Sympathy? I have none for them. They should fall as far as they can. I'll live my life happily, and they can descend into their own hell for all I care.